Renaissance, the Rebirth. And this is a cultural period of the 15th century Florence. Humanism was a pursuit of glory and fame. There was a thirst for classical learning. So there was a rediscovery of ancient Rome and Greece. And the art that was produced was an image, a mirror image art form of the classical Greece. So a lot of the art looked very, very, very similar to classical Greek. There was a desire to construct humanism from the learning, and there was an emphasis on the good life as an intellectual, and there was a repudiation of medieval religion and ethics. Music in Medici Florence was overshadowed by the northern contemporaries, but that did not stop the Italians' interest in music. Lorenzo Medici was a skilled flute player, and he founded the School of Harmony in Florence, and it attracted musicians from all over Europe. Music that was played during that time enlivened festivals and public processions. The Fratolla was a harmonious poem, and it usually had four voice parts, and it had a melody, two or three instruments. And the style was very simple and deliberate, which was a deliberate contrast to the complexity of some of the more sophisticated vocal music of the time. The Canto Carnesco was a carnival song, and those were the two most popular um, pieces of music during the music of the Medici Florence. Here we have the Davids. We have Donatello, Verrocchio, Michelangelo, and Bernini. The first one here, Donatello, was from 1440, and the Verrocchio David was 1473, created between 1473 and 1475, and Michelangelo, 1501 to 1504, and Bernini, 1623 to 1624. Donatello's David was commissioned by Cosimo de' Medici himself. And the features of this David was the contrapposto, where the weight is shifted to the right leg or onto the right leg, while the left leg is bent. And you will notice that a few of the Davids are posed that way. Donatello's David is sporting boots and hat. And there is a biblical head of Goliath that is beneath his feet. And he appears to be semi-feminine or effeminate. He's made of bronze. It's 115 centimeters. It has boyish facial expressions, soft tendrils of hair, a laurel-crowned peasant hat, and a pentagonal and helmet. The beard is coarse and disheveled, but there is an innocence and evil about this David. And he appears to be kind of weak and, in this case, triumphing over the strong. Verrocchio's David features the contrapposta stance as well. He's semi-nude, and there's speculation that this might be the head of Leonardo da Vinci. The statue is bronze and stands at 125 centimeters, and it's of a very young David. And at his feet, we see the slain head of Goliath, which is biblical in context. And there's an ornament on the leather tunic that he's wearing that shows somewhat of a self-styled Arabic letters that are imprinted on it. Michelangelo's David also features this contrapposto stance. He is nude, though, and he's a strong, assured male, which is kind of the opposite of Donatello's David. And he's stripped of any biblical narrative. We saw the previous David, Verrocchio's David, with the head of Goliath at his feet, which is somewhat biblical in context. But this Michelangelo's David has been stripped of a biblical narrative. He's carrying only a stone and a slingshot. It's marble at 5.7 meters. And the body depicted to respond to the location where it was put up in the cathedral or outside of the cathedral. So it was on the exterior of the cathedral, and it's high up. And because of the location of this David, Michelangelo chose to form the statue. The body parts of the statue are disproportionate to that of a normal human. But the reason for that is because of the location of the statue. The statue is pretty high up. So when you look up at this statue, your focus is actually on the head and the hands, which are the two parts that are most disproportional. And we also see that the leg is too long for the body, but this is the staging that Michelangelo chose. So here we have the Davids again. We can now kind of take a look at them and compare them. We have Donatello's David with Verrocchio's, Michelangelo's, and Bernini. And we can see the kind of boyish, effeminate style of Donatello's David now. And the body itself almost looks undeveloped, like an adolescent. Verrocchio's David is partially nude, as opposed to Donatello, which is totally nude, with the exception of the hat and boots, as we can see. And we also see Michelangelo's David, who is totally nude and devoid of any biblical narrative, as they say, as we heard earlier in the lecture. And then Bernini's David, as we can see, who is in full motion, which is actually a Baroque style. And this Michelangelo, if we look at the hands, you can now see how large the hands are and disproportional to the body, and that leg that is extended, which is also disproportionate to the body. And we see the three Davids, Donatello, Verrocchio, and Michelangelo, who are all in that contrapposta pose. High Renaissance, which was from 1490 to 1527. We see a move from early Renaissance Florence to High Renaissance Rome. And humanism is seen in the paintings and sculptures of this time period. And there is a reconnection with the faith and the nobility of man. The discovery and mastery of linear perspective is present in the art, which we'll see later. And shadowing was mastered also at this time. So a lot of innovative things are going on during High Renaissance. There's a willingness to learn and explore. And there's also a rebirth in naturalism. So the anatomical drawings and paintings are more to true life form. And secularism is on the rise, which is a move from a focus on religion. Some of the most notable artists of the time was Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519, and he worked with oil paint and sfumato. The sfumato was a technique of allowing tones and colors to kind of shade gradually into one another, which produced much softer lines. Michelangelo, 1475 to 1564, was a sculptor, and he also did frescoes. Raphael, 1483 to 1520, was a painter. Correggio, 1489 to 1534, was a painter. And Donato Brumante was an architect, and he was 1444 to 1514. Mannerism during the Renaissance, 1580 to 1680, makes a move to Rome. So we're out of Florence now and into Rome, and mannerism spread throughout Europe, and it was a mixture of classical and antique. It was known to have an element of artificiality to it. The paintings had a short myopic vision, often two-dimensional, and the scale was abnormal. There was a sophisticated indulgence in the bizarre, though, but it was still exaggerated. The paintings were exaggerated, and we'll see that. The grotesque pictorial fantasies are present in this mannerism, and they were distorted. So the subjects are graceful, but they were oftentimes had elongated limbs and small heads. Here we can see the style of mannerism, and you see that the figures are not like what we've seen in the High Renaissance with more of a true to life form, that mirror image of the classical Greek style. Here we see that the figures are grotesque. They're large, Um, the heads are small. You can see elongated arms, and so here you see the head. Here is small, and even over here to the right. And the body forms are large and grotesque. These do not look like what the average human would look like. The colors, as you can see, are kind of a contrast to each other. You see light and then dark. The colors are somewhat muted. Here we see another arm that's elongated here. Here's another small head with a large body. And here we have Raphael versus Protormo. And the two paintings are of the same thing, the Disposition of Christ. Raphael's done in 1507 and Protormo's in 1528. But we can definitely see a shift in styles here. Raphael's painting has far more detail, is three-dimensional. The shading, as we heard earlier, is of a far better quality and mastered. And Protormo's Disposition of Christ is two-dimensional. The body proportion is not a mirror imaged as the classical style of the Renaissance. So though the subject matter is the same, the style is far different. So next week we will take a look at some other paintings and artwork and literature as we move along in our journey through Western civilization.